So it seems that we've got our first rules leaks from the upcoming Black Templar Codex. Let's talk about the datasheet for the Execrator Chaplain and a few other rather interesting teasers, including Black Templars losing Oath of Moment and having it replaced by their Templar Vows. Hello and welcome back to Allspace Tactics, where today we're talking Black Templars, and in this video I thought we'd do an overview of a recent leak, plus a quick roundup of all the things Games Workshop have told us about the upcoming codex so far. From Games Workshop's latest codex roadmaps, we basically had the codexes on the left plus Chaos Knights, so in theory the next ones that we're waiting on are the Black Templars, Grey Knights and Imperial Knights. I'd kind of expect that these won't be too far away at this point. I feel like pretty much any of them could turn up on any Sunday preview when they announce it. The Grey Knights were the first one that were revealed, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're next. We've already had the Chaos Knights leapfrog them for some reason. Maybe it could be a hint that the Black Templars aren't so very far away though, at least if we're now getting leaks for the book. In game at the moment, the Black Templars are struggling a little bit in terms of in-game power. Not very many people are playing them in tournaments currently. It seems that even Deathwatch are having more people play them, which doesn't usually happen too often. Their win rates are right on the lower end of the spectrum, despite a few recent points updates. I would guess that if Games Workshop wanted to, they probably could fix them with points though. They have had the same rules for the entirety of 10th edition, and they have been pretty strong at times. Just feels like the previous nudges weren't quite enough to get them good. I'd guess the Black Templar Codex will be out before any upcoming balance update though, and hopefully it'll be one of the ones that's more interesting out of Games Workshop Codex releases, which certainly haven't always necessarily added all that much interest to their factions. I feel like they have maybe been doing a bit better in the ones in 2025 at least. The book will be priced as a codex supplement, so cheaper than most codexes at £20 or $35, though these ones do need the core codex Space Marines to function properly, so collecting the factions rules-wise can be more expensive than some. And so far Games Workshop's been at least fairly sparse on details for it, stating 3 detachments, presumably adding in new datasheets for the new Ancient and Execrator Chaplain, and removing the Firstborn Crusader squad. For the new miniatures, they've got their Crusade Ancient coming, an all very knightly banner bearer with the choice of either a big shield or an orc skull on his banner. I'd guess he'll help out with OC for his unit, and I think that it was implied that he might allow his squads to fight on death as well. And then relevant for the leaks is the Execrator Chaplain, basically aims to be an angry frontline chaplain leading the Crusader squads and sword brethren into battle, maybe going heavy on the chaplains that want to lead by example, not that Space Marine chaplains are averse to doing that for the most part anyway. He's got options for a Pyre Pistol and a mastercrafted Power Sword, plus different styles of Crozius he can bear. And they gave us a few rules teasers, including having a whole bunch of damage 2 attacks that he can join Sword Brethren and grant advance and charge, so we already had a few hints as to his datasheet, which now seem to be completely confirmed. Finally, for release things that we knew so far, they've also had the Combat Patrol box set for Black Templars. That was shown off just the other day, consistent with the previous leaks that it was Sword Brethren and Blade Guard in the same box, plus a Crusader squad and Emperor's Champion. It seems to have been at least fairly well received. Besides the champion, all units that you could have multiple of, and you could easily kit bash the champion into something else with all the spare parts that you get from models in the box. So far, no hints of any sort of launch Battle Force box set for the Black Templars though. I guess it's not impossible they could still have one, though I would have expected it to have been revealed at some point by now. That seems to be what Games Workshop has given us so far, but as ever with Warhammer codexes it seems that bits seem to escape and leak onto the internet before their time. I feel like they more often tend to come out in the week before their release, though it seems that this one is super early. The Templar Codex isn't even announced for pre-order yet, though we seem to have a leaked datasheet and a bunch of rules. Looks like these were shared around the internet in the past 24 hours ago. Basically a direct photo of one datasheet from the codex, plus a bunch of other text leaks to go alongside, at least one of which looks like it is confirmed by the datasheet. As a result, I feel like there's a pretty high chance these do turn out to be right. All of them seem plausible enough. They'll obviously take the text bits with a pinch of salt. They could be anywhere between completely made up to slightly misunderstanding something, or they could be completely right. We won't know until the codex actually has some confirmed details. Focusing on that Execrator datasheet first, obviously we don't know his points cost, and that's going to be a big deal as to his unit strength. With Space Marine generic characters like this though, I'd be kind of surprised if it was out of the region of around about 60 to 80 points, and probably on the lower end of that. It seems that he's only able to join Crusader squads and Sword Brethren, so perhaps a little bit unfortunately it does look like they're doing the same Space Wolves thing, where the Black Templar specific characters can't join other generic choices in Codex Space Marines. So it looks like you can't have this guy, say, leading those Blade Guards, or leading some Assault Intercessors or something into battle. Maybe not the worst for trying to keep the focus on their unique units, but at the same time it's weird having 2 sets of Space Marines fighting side by side, with one of them being sort of second-class citizens within the same codex. In any case though, for his stat line he moves 6 inches, is toughness 4 with a 3+ save and a 4+ invulnerable save, 4 wounds with leadership 5+ and OC 1, basically the same stat line as a standard Space Marine Chaplain. He has all the keywords that you'd expect normally, like an infantry and character and leader and things. The extra ones I guess is that he still has the Chaplain keyword on his datasheet, he has grenades, and he has the Tacticus keyword, though nothing really particularly unexpected there. As mentioned earlier though, it does seem that he doesn't have the Oath of Moment rule on his datasheet and instead has Templar Vows, which does fit with the text leak saying that these will replace Oath of Moment for Black Templars. That's fairly interesting news in itself, but sticking for his datasheet at the moment, he comes armed with the Crozius Arcanum, 5 attacks at Strength 6, AP 1 and Damage 2, same as the regular Chaplain there, and he can be armed with an Absolver Bolt Pistol on top of that, and then for his bonus weapon he either gets the option to upgrade the Absolver Bolt Pistol to a Pyre Pistol, so basically a flamer weapon but with the pistol keyword, or alternatively, and the obvious better choice, is to add a mastercrafted power weapon, take that power sword alongside, and that gets him 3 extra attacks at Strength 5, AP 2 and Damage 2, all with lethal hits. So as Games Workshop said, that gets you an 8 attack character, with all 8 of those attacks being Damage 2 and having at least a mid-strength and some AP. Just individually he's going to be a pretty solid threat against things like enemy Space Marines. Then for his special rules, as previewed, he allows his units to advance and charge. He only gets that if he's leading a unit though, so if he's left by himself that won't function anymore. That was definitely a handy enough one to have, but its importance might depend on whether or not the Black Templars get easy access to that with other ways. If their Codex detachments wind up having advance and charge stratagems, it might be a little bit less useful. Otherwise, looks like his second special rule is a Battle Shock one, unfortunately, and really quite a bad one at that. If his unit destroys an enemy unit in the fight phase, enemy units within 6 inches of this model must take a Battle Shock test. That's just a really unhelpful sequence of events, kind of situational, and you're doing well if you trigger it in the first place. And then even then, you have to be close to enemy units, and the Battle Shock test at the end of your turn has to be meaningful, where a lot of the time it won't, as they'll just be going into their turn and immediately cancel it before they score objectives. I guess occasionally it might prevent a stratagem, or prevent them contesting a secondary objective, but the vast majority of time that won't do anything. Overall, I feel like his datasheet is at least interesting. Advance and Charge is a good threat range buff, and it does have really quite a lot of personal threats for any one character. If there's any enhancements that amp up melee damage, then he looks like he could be a prime choice for extra AP or extra damage or something. Compared with a regular Chaplain though, losing the +1 to wound is a big downside. And if there's no way to attach him alongside other things, I feel like units like the Sword Brethren and the Crusader Squad might well have issues with punching up against tough stuff. They generally want lethal hits or +1 to wound in some fashion if they can get them. I guess if those things are easy to get with detachment rules or enhancements or something like that, it might not matter. But if he was released just at the moment, costing the same as a Chaplain, I don't really feel like his rules would be a slam dunk. Let me know your thoughts on him down in the comments though. Otherwise though, alongside that picture came a bunch of text leaks, the first of which as mentioned was Oath of Moment being replaced by Templar Vows, and that would be really quite a big change compared with the standard Divergent chapters, as they always have it listed on their datasheets and they still keep the core Space Marine special rule, though I feel like it maybe has limited their character just a tiny bit. It means that the faction rule for all the Space Marine chapters has to be the same, so you don't have any space to give them something fun and unique there. It has to be done with detachments. So I wouldn't necessarily say that replacing it with something else is an absolutely awful idea, provided whatever else steps up to the plate is actually good. I guess by the way that it says that it replaces Oath with Templar Vows, then the most likely thing is that instead of Oath of Moment you get the choice of either the Sustained Lethal Hits, Anti-Psyker, or the Feel No Pain as your army rule choice chosen at the start of the game. Obviously we don't actually know that information yet though, and for all we know the Templar Vows have been completely rewritten. The Space Wolf Saga style ones certainly were from their index detachment. As a result, absolutely definitely not worth stressing that it's going to be weak or anything until we know the rule. It might put the other Space Marine datasheets in a weird kind of place though. They all have Oath of Moment listed on them. I guess that if they're replacing the Black Templar unique units with something else, then they'd probably have some sort of rule saying that if you're taking other Space Marine units, they also replace it with Templar Vows. I guess there could be other ways that you could handle it, but it seems very unlikely that they'd allow Oath to function for some units in your army and Templar Vows to be active for others. It could mean that certain Marine firepower units aren't quite as good at all focusing on one target if they don't have Oath though. As a consequence, it means that you would have Templar Vows as the army rule and then something else for the detachment rules, so they could have multiple layers worth of stacking Templar themed rules with that. So it will be an interesting one, not just weighing up the Templar Vows versus Oath, but the addition of Templar Vows plus whatever detachment rules they get on top of that. Overall, at least seems interesting, and provided they actually make the rules strong enough, doesn't seem like any bad thing at all really in my mind. There were a bunch of other datasheet changes mentioned. The one small one that's listed on the Execrator datasheet is that the Crusader Squad and Sword Brethren aren't named Primaris anymore. That was not really too unexpected. I feel like Games Workshop is sort of done with Primaris being a completely separate and different thing to the rest of the Space Marines. It's just the way that Space Marines are now, and I guess no need to differentiate if they're retiring the Firstborn Crusader Squad. To be honest, the Primaris version always felt like an updated models versus that, as opposed to a completely new and separate unit, really. Next up though, we've got a bunch of claimed character changes. The source stated a few things being shifted around. The 5+ critical hits rule apparently being moved from Helbrecht to the Black Templar Marshal. If that's right, I guess it would be some good incentive to have both a Marshal plus a Castellan leading the same fighter unit. You could have auto wounds going off very easily, and maybe sustained hits too if that part of Templar Vows stays around. Though I guess bear in mind that if Oath of Moment goes away, you wouldn't be able to re-roll to fish for those 5s and 6s. If the Marshal gains the 5+ critical hits, there's maybe the question of what that would replace as well. If he still does 3 stratagems like the captains do, then I guess it would be instead of the +3 attacks and devastating wound buff, and that would be quite a big trade-off if it went away, as that's really quite a big damage boost. Otherwise, maybe in less welcome news, Grimaldus' 5+ Feel No Pain reportedly might be replaced by +1 Toughness. It's certainly not unhelpful, but it's a much worse defensive rule. It wouldn't be making blocks of Crusader squads quite so ridiculously tanky as he can currently if that changes. Obviously that would be a big nerf, though if that happened I'd certainly expect Grimaldus to take a big points cut as well. At 120 points he's paying a pretty massive premium versus the vast majority of Space Marine characters out there. I feel like it's largely due to that Feel No Pain. Then they've stated that the Castellans swap their fallback and shoot and charge lieutenant style rule for a 4+ chance to gain 1 command point when their unit destroys another. If that's right, then it sounds like both the Marshal and the Castellan might be swapping out their supporting rules, maybe keeping the core thing that the Captain and Lieutenant do, but then making their second one a bit more Black Templar themed in one way or another. Command point generation definitely isn't bad, but on the other hand, that seems like a slightly clunky one to make work in any way reliably. It feels like it's swapping one situational but helpful rule for another one. This one may be a bit more random though. All of those seem plausible enough, maybe not the most interesting or exciting, and obviously bear in mind unconfirmed at the moment. Then finally for the small roundup of leaks, reportedly Sword Brethren might be losing the +1 damage rule that they have on their datasheet, and replaced by some sort of reactive move against enemies falling back, and again like Grimaldus that sounds like it'd probably be broadly a downgrade, but if that did happen I'd strongly suspect they'd get damage 2 on their base weapon profiles for their power swords and things. That does seem to be the normal trend of how Games Workshop's been treating these elite infantry units recently, like the Space Wolves with their bunch of power weapons with damage 2 on them. As a result, it will probably make them overall slightly less threatening, as I guess you wouldn't get that on the boosted versions of their weapons that already had damage to, or at least that will be my guess. And if it's not present on the datasheet rule, you wouldn't be able to make crazy character combos, like giving +1 damage to Helbrecht when he attached, which basically made a unit that sort of broke math a bit all the way up to one-shotting Titans and things. That certainly had a lot of fun factor for just enormous amounts of sheer damage. Again, if their capabilities go down a bit though, there's nothing to say the points won't go down, and new Vows and detachment rules could amp up the damage once again. Still early days at the moment. For first impressions of these ones, I feel like the datasheet changes don't really generate much excitement to be honest. It does broadly look like ironing out of some of the power combos and maybe trying to make characters have predictable effects on leading their units as opposed to create great big super synergy between them. Probably if anything the more interesting things is what might happen with Templar Vows plus detachment rules, as that could mean that there's really quite a lot of Black Templar rules flying around for their armies. Obviously I'd just treat this as potential interesting previews. We don't even know that it's right yet. And while the initial reaction that I've seen to this is maybe a bit doom and gloom, early impressions of codexes don't often tend to be all that good in 40k. Just for literally the last one, we've just had Chaos Knights where everyone was a bit down in the dumps about them after seeing the codex and rules, and then they've gone on to be perhaps one of the single strongest armies in the game due to some points cuts. Certainly felt like the anger was a bit premature there maybe. That's not to say there aren't other valid criticisms though. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Anyway, I'll leave this one there for now. I'll certainly look forward to covering any more news or rumours that we get. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I do tend to post new 40k videos just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel, then feel free to check out the Patreon page. That's links down in the video description below. Channel patrons get a few advantages, seeing occasional videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.